Hi, everyone. This is Jack Allwild with another money episode. We have special guest Christy Duckett-Harris with us. I heard her at the Private Money Club event last month, and she was a fabulous speaker. Christy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
So before we get into your real estate and mobile home experience, I'd like to start out by asking, what was your relationship with money growing up?
I love answering this question because probably like a lot of people, I grew up in Virginia, a very small town, still pretty small, about 62 miles west of Washington, D.C. And my dad was a farmer. So I grew up with a very basic, don't spend money, don't leverage, don't use your credit. Like if you can't pay cash, like for everything in life, then you shouldn't buy it. So I grew up in a family like that. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. My parents will celebrate their 53rd wedding anniversary this year. So it's really cool. I grew up very traditional. What was interesting, even though being taught that, my father, because he grew up in that work hard generation, because of course they're baby boomers now in their 70s, he didn't want us to work hard. So he really preached, go to college, get a job. I'm from that generation, but it was really hard because I always knew I was an entrepreneur at heart. So I went off to get my college degree in psychology, soon to find out what the heck am I going to do with this degree? And went into corporate America, pretty much like the path everyone, teaches about. So really my financial education was, if you work hard, you'll make money, get in a job and stay there forever, but don't use your credit. So, which is the opposite of everything, right? Real estate related.
Mm-hmm. So when and how did you discover real estate, and what was the thought, like, this is the vehicle I'll use to grow my wealth?
Yeah, so this was really interesting because even though my father really taught all of this in my financial education path, he always owned property because he was a farmer. So he bought farms, and naturally, whatever farm he bought, there was a house on it. So he rented it. And he was like the worst landlord ever because he let everyone live for free, which is kind of ironic because if we moved back home after college, my dad would say, you're going to pay rent to live here, right? It reminds me of the Huxtables or the Cosby Show. Like, when Cliff is trying to teach Theo the lesson, that was my dad. Like, but he would let these tenants live for free. And what was even more hilarious is when I was home on like spring break, he would make me paint the houses because they had ripped them up. So like real estate to me was kind of this aversion. Like I knew it made money, but he didn't do it right. But what he did right, and I'll tell you to this day, is he bought the land, kept the land, farmed it. So he got tax credits for farming. And now he is in his 70s and selling off a lot of that land. So everything he bought for very low, he sold for ridiculously high. So real estate was kind of always in my blood and background. But I went to college, got out, started working in corporate America. And it's almost like real estate found me and came back to me, honestly, because what ended up happening was I started working for a seminar company that actually educated people on real estate. And I was working in the realm of literally the back of the room, facilitating the event. So I was able to go in there and literally watch all these speakers talk about real estate and how they made money in real estate. So oddly enough, like, even though I went the career path in college, it came back to like, I was in a room where there were a bunch of investors and I found that these were the people making the most money. So I was like, there's something to this, and real estate keeps coming back. So that's kind of how I got into it.
Awesome.
So I don't know if it was by luck or law of attraction or whatever you want to call it.
And then, well, why don't we do like a mobile home 101? I know a lot of terms get thrown out. Maybe we could start out with just what is the difference between like a mobile home, a manufactured home, and a modular home?
Great question, because I get this all the time. So a mobile home, technically when mobile homes started back in the day, if you think about your grandparents traveling, and my grandparents did it, they would snowbird down to Florida. They would take like a travel trailer and they would set up at an RV park. Like that's very common. So they started out as, being called trailers. Then eventually what happened is more people were moving into parks, and that's where mobile homes came along, but they were still mobile in the sense that they were trailers. They had a hitch, they could be moved. So interchangeably, you'll hear manufactured and mobile home being used all the time, but really manufactured homes, in 1976, actually June 15th, 1976, HUD came in and said, listen, These older mobile homes and trailers haven't been held to any guidelines or standards. So we want to create a standard that it's a better product. And moving forward on that date, everything was known as a manufactured home. So they were built to like more of a standard. They had to be inspected. They had to go through a process. And modular homes, and remember, all of these, the manufacturers, the mobile, the modulars, they're made in a factory, and then they're delivered on site and put together. Now, with the modular homes, they're really held to the same standard as a single family home. They look like a single family home, but they are made in a factory, delivered to the land, and then a contractor puts them all together. So when you think of modular homes, I always say we don't do a lot with those, but I have two good friends in North Carolina that invest in them. And they're making a killing. They put them on land and sell them, and they comp out against houses. The manufactured homes are like their own thing against each other. So
if you had to describe some of the risks between just like a normal single family home and then a manufactured home, can you get any weigh up some pros and cons of those?
Yeah, and that's why I really got into this. So there's lots, and I think it depends on if you're flipping them or keeping them. What I found is just in the sense of remodeling and rehabbing, whether it's a rental or a fix and flip. On single family homes, you're going to see that they're held to a much higher standard because they're actually built from the ground up, right? So if you're taking out a wall out of a house, it could be a load-bearing wall. And a manufactured home, everything's made in the factory and put together, so it's completely different. Like the way it's formed together, if you're taking out a wall, it's not the same. So you don't have to pull permitting on these as much. So you're not dealing with county and city inspectors, which, as you know, helps the process speed up, because once you get them in there, they start picking apart the whole entire house. So the rehab process costs a lot less, in my opinion, too. So labor is labor, right? It's really who you're getting. But most of the time when you're using rehabbing a single family home, you want to use a licensed GC, a licensed plumber, electrician, roofer, all these people. On the manufactured homes, a lot of times you can really get in and use a handyman that specializes in them. And what you're going to find is the materials used in a house are much more expensive than a manufactured home, because the manufactured home has manufactured home specific materials sold at like a manufactured home store versus a Lowe's or Home Depot. So those are some of the bigger ones I love, which we were kind of just chit-chatting about before we jumped on here, is the taxes are much, much lower on manufactured homes than single family homes. And to me, that's huge, because when we're looking at cash flow and long-term and keeping them, a manufactured home, you just can't beat the taxes and insurance on them.
So when you mentioned the pieces, the supplies come from, I guess, a supply store for manufactured homes. So I guess it would be important that you are close to these supply stores, I'm guessing.
Absolutely. And you probably don't even know they're out there. Like literally, it's just like a mobile home park. I laugh because some people, you either have this stigma in your mind because you grew up in an area. So where I grew up was a small town. We had maybe 3 mobile home parks there. One, ironically, was on the other side of the farm I grew up on. So that was a more rural one, pretty nice. Like we knew the people that owned it. One was a trailer park, I'll call it. It was very drug ridden and bad, and everybody knew to stay away from there. And the other one was the one on the edge of town. I didn't know much about that. So the stigma is kind of like, oh, mobile home parks, oh, stay away from them. So you sometimes don't even realize they're in your neighborhood or right around the corner. Same with the manufactured supply centers. When you're driving, like now that I say this out loud, everyone uses the analogy, when you buy a car, you never see, like, you have the red car until you're driving, then everyone has it. So it's the exact same way. You're driving now and you're like, oh, a mobile home supply store. There we go. And it's usually in a rural part of your town. So it's not going to be in the downtown. If you're in a city, I'm in Columbia, South Carolina. Ironically, you can drive right out of downtown, and in West Columbia, you do see all the dealerships and homes, because everything was rural at one point and everything grew outward. So
can you talk a little bit about the values, and I guess maybe separating, like, if they just own the structure versus the structure and the land, or some of how that works?
Yes, because this is also a really confusing part. And I think another reason people stay away from them. So typically, if you see a park, and this isn't everywhere, because you're going to find in Florida, Arizona, California, more of like the warmer climate retirement areas, people won't own the land in the park, but they will own their home. Okay. So, and sometimes there's park owned homes. So when you see a park, what that is let's pretend like you yourself own the park and I own a home. I don't have land to park my home on. So I'm going to come to you and put my home into your park. I'm going to be qualified, right? They're probably going to do a background check on me. They're going to check maybe my credit, check for any evictions. And if everything clears and looks good, they'll say, okay, you'll say, okay, Christy, you can move in, but I'm going to charge you a monthly lot fee for you parking your manufactured home on the land. And that could be $250 to, if you're in a California market, $1,500 a month, which seems crazy, but rents obviously are much higher. But when you look at that, we're going to include certain things. So because I don't own the infrastructure of the land, you're going to take care of maybe the water, maybe you'll take care of the landscaping, the sewer, and I'm just paying you this monthly fee that I would normally pay if I lived in a house. I would pay that to the city or county, but now I'm paying that to you as the park owner. But then I'm able to keep my home in the park. So when you look at a model like that, sometimes you can go in and buy a house in a mobile home park that's free and clear. Some people might have a mortgage. It's called a chattel loan because you're not getting a real land home mortgage on that because you don't own the land. So that's called a chattel loan. That's just on the vehicle, which is the mobile home. And then when you are driving out in a more rural area and you see a manufactured home on land, that actual home has been detitled. So when that home is in the park, there is a title on it. And what a title means in most states, not all, but in most, it's like a car title. Like I would go to the DMV here in South Carolina, I would give them the title to my mobile home. When I move that mobile home onto land and I detitle it, it means that title completely disappears. And now that manufactured home is attached to the land like a real house, like a real single family home. So it's actually gaining more value because the land and the home is combined together. And that's literally, I started investing in mobile homes since 2007. And what I've seen is the ones that are attached to land, the prices and values have appreciated so much because housing prices have gone up. So now we're kind of in competition with those.
So if a manufactured home gets put on land and is detitled, it gets attached to the land. And then if you were to run, like when people do their comps, do they view that house any differently than, I guess, a normal single family home structure?
Yes, you do. And you
okay.
So it's titled just like a single family home, meaning there's a deed. You can get FHA financing if it's a new home.
Okay.
You can still get traditional financing. 21st Mortgage is a company that does it. It might not be all the same mortgage companies we know, but there's a lot that do finance. So that's the value within that. It is. But when you comp it out, I can't comp. So whereas we're talking about modular homes on the next level, that's like a real house. If it were a modular home on land, it would be comped out with a single family home. Those are apples to apples. When we get to manufactured homes, they're like one step below. So I am only going to comp my manufactured homes against other manufactured homes on land.
Okay. Can you talk? Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, you can pull true comps. So you would have your agent pull comps off the MLS. What I tend to tell people is when you're buying these manufactured homes on land, buy them more in like an area where there's more homes and almost like a community setting. So you have comparable.
I gotcha. Okay. Can you talk a little bit about just the overall landscape right now and maybe just specifically to your area and what you're seeing?
Yeah, I'm seeing these things fly off the market. It's crazy. Like I literally have lived in South Carolina since 2007. So I've watched the cycles of manufactured homes and they were always moving. They were always desirable. People were buying them. But when COVID happened, just like everywhere else, you saw an inventory shortage. You saw a lot of people coming in the market. But I think now more than ever, what we're getting is a lot of baby boomers that are retiring. That's the biggest segment of our population. And they don't want a 4,000 square foot house. They move, a lot of our people are moving from up north. They're like, I have a great retirement. I have a great pension. I sold my house up north and probably a rental that I've owned free and clear forever. The market's super up. So I just literally brought $3 million down here to South Carolina. Yes, I could buy a house, but the reality is I still want to travel. So what's happening is these manufactured homes, I feel like, are looking more desirable in price. And people are also realizing they're actually a nice product. It's not an old trashy mobile home or trailer, what they once thought. It's an actual house on a couple acres. And, that was the trend. A lot of people were like, I'm in the city if something like COVID ever happens again, I don't want to be on top of people. I want to be out on acreage. So it created this desirability, but it also drove the prices up tremendously. I mean, homes, I literally could buy manufactured homes I could buy on land probably in 2019 that I sold for 120,000. I'll just give you a number.
Mhm.
These were like early 2000 models, are probably now in that same neighborhood selling for 200 to 225.
Wow.
Which, I mean, you hadn't seen that historically forever in manufactured homes. But I think that's also a testament to the quality of the new ones coming out as well.
Mhm. So I'm sure some of the listeners, Christy, are like, this sounds great. I'm a little overwhelmed with all the information. Where should I go to get started?
Yeah. So it's funny. For years, I kept telling people about mobile and manufactured homes, and they're like, yeah. Nobody listened, right? And then it was like, 2010, 2012, 2013, when the housing market dropped and things were coming back, you started seeing big buyers and hedge funds and Warren Buffett and people like that talking about mobile home parks and mobile homes. And then it just kind of clicked for people like, oh, and you know how people tend to follow the herds, like, oh, now it's the thing. And I'm laughing like, oh my gosh, I've been saying this forever. But what's interesting is I always said, I'm going to write a book, and I started and then I stopped. And I'm sure you've probably been at that point where, everybody wants to write a book on something they love. And it's like, it's a 15-year process. So I was like, you know what? COVID hit and we were on such lockdown. I said, I think it's the time to really write this course on mobile and manufactured homes. Like, I want to write something to help people. I'm not looking to make $1 million. I don't care about that. I just want to help people, because what was happening is I would get questions out the wazoo all the time. And I felt like I was disservicing people because I would give a quick answer, but I'm like, that's not helping you because you don't know all the nuances. And you're actually probably going to get yourself into big trouble by trying to do something with limited knowledge. So I wrote a course, and you can go to my website. It's ChristyDuckett.com. And on ChristyDuckett.com, I've kind of grown that from there, because I found there's other awesome investors out in the market that buy parks or do different things. So I've done a lot of webinars and podcasts teaching people. But then I also soon found that it's hard to hold yourself accountable and get through an online course. That's the truth. I mean, I've signed up for them, and as much as you want it, life is distracting. So a couple of months ago, I said, you know what, I'm going to launch a 4-week take action challenge. And I'm just going to take people through it and see if I can make someone eliminate all the fear, answer all the questions, and they can actually get out and do a deal in 4 weeks. And what was cool is the first round I had a couple students that did. And then like a month later, someone said, oh my gosh, I finally done it. I did a deal. And I was like, this works. So I started launching a course to do that. So all that's on my website, ChristyDuckett.com, if you have interest in mobile homes.
Awesome. Well, as we're closing out, I like to ask everyone, what's the best and worst personal finance advice you've either heard or received?
That's really good. So I think this goes twofold, because I think some of this comes from my upbringing and my parents. I would say working hard is good and bad, because that's financial, right? And saving every dollar. So I think there's some truth to that. And I think there's some that isn't. I do believe you have to work hard. My best advice, though, was put systems into place and work smarter, not harder. And I learned that from Than Merrill. He owns an education company, and it was really all about the systems. And when that clicked, I realized I can take myself out of the business, but my business can still run. And I think that's very important, because we're all technicians within our business, and without a system, you're just as good as the next person. The worst advice I would say kind of comes from my father, which is hand in hand with the best. Don't leverage, save every dollar. There's something to that I think can almost give you a limited mindset to never move forward. However, I do value a lot of what he says. My parents are in their 70s. They're in a great financial position because they did work hard. They did save every dollar, right? And he did also a great job reinvesting, but he didn't teach us that naturally. He said, go to college. So I think that all kind of hand in hand went with some bad advice. But on the flip side, I understand what he was saying. Don't get yourself so leveraged that you get yourself in a bad position. So it was really, a lot of the concepts were smart, but I just needed to find someone who was the entrepreneur at the next level to take those and break them down to what I needed.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, Christy, I think people are going to get a lot of value out of this. Why don't you give them a handoff? I know you mentioned ChristyDuckett.com. Is there anywhere else people should go look if they want to get in touch with you? Or
Yeah, you can actually follow me on Instagram, and listen, my Instagram is some personal stuff because that's my life, right? Real estate and personal combined. It's Duckett-Harris is my Instagram handle. And you can also find me on Facebook, Christy Duckett-Harris. So I'm on all social media platforms. Definitely follow me. I love it because as much as I love providing information and helping people, I love seeing what other people do because I'm constantly learning, just like being here with you. So I think this is so cool. So always pay it forward.
Yeah, great message. Thank you so much for coming on, Christy.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.